From this decade, we not only see high fidelity, but similar cultural impact to that of established industries. Like, let's take a slice of the sports industry, right? It has been around for ages. The idea of cheering for a team, following that team as players compete against other players, this is then mirrored into the virtual world. We have these digital gladiators competing against each other through an array of pixels that have very real-world prizes. In 2006, we see the release of the Wii and its breakthrough in motion-based gameplay. Over the next decade, we see the continual growth of the industry with titans like World of Warcraft, GTA, Assassin's Creed. This is the era of big-budget gaming, and probably where we see the biggest advancement in terms of fidelity.
The Titan X.
Like the games of 2005 look so different than the games of 2010, and the games of 2010 look so different than the games of 2015. A Seattle-based company releases a program that was originally meant to allow for easier updates to their games. It then grows into something much larger. An entire PC platform for the purchase and download of digital games, Steam. This establishes gaming outside of consoles and makes it more convenient than classic disk installs. Now we see Microsoft throwing their hat in the ring with the Xbox, releasing their hit Halo. The critics and the players loved the game. So just before the turn of the century, the games we've seen up to this point are single player, local multiplayer. That changes after Sega rises from the ashes of failed products and releases the Dreamcast. It wouldn't be a huge hit in the market, but it was a technological breakthrough, in the sense that it allows for online gameplay, such as the industry classic that I'm sure you're all familiar with, 18-wheeler American Pro Trucker. The dawn of the PlayStation. Switching the industry from cartridges to CD-based games allowed for a massive amount of data to be stored on any single disc, ushering in 3D textures and polygons to coat the base of ones and zeros. In the era of classic action movies, we also begin to see shooters taking on gore and violence. With the release of Mortal Kombat and Doom, the industry needed a way for parents to know what games were appropriate for their children. Thus, the ESRB was born. While traveling on a Shinkansen, or a bullet train, a Japanese developer takes notice of a bored businessman playing with an LCD calculator by pressing buttons. An idea springs into his mind: a watch that doubles as a minigame to pass the time. He then goes on to create Game & Watch while working at Nintendo. These devices serve as the foundation for the Game Boy that the same developer, Yokoi, releases in 1989 with great success. Here we see the launch of the NES and Mario. This was a huge step above the previous consoles, mainly the graphics and extra memory, from Atari's measly 128 bits to a whopping 2 kilobytes. Tragedy hits the industry. E.T., the game, was released, and I googled why it's considered one of the worst games ever made. Apparently, according to the Video Game History Foundation, reviewers from the era found the game confusing, clunky, hard to learn, with bad graphics even for the time. In that same year, Atari emptied out a warehouse near the desert city of Alamogordo, New Mexico, dumping nearly 800,000 games into the landfill, much of those including copies of the failed E.T. Over the next 5 years, Atari establishes itself as the leaders by releasing the Atari 2600, featuring games like Space Invaders, Donkey Kong, and Frogger.
This is Hound Dog 7, over.
A German boy is born in the midst of Nazi Germany. He and his family flee the country and settle in Bronx, New York. Here, the kid works at a factory, then takes a course to learn radio repair. From there, he serves as an intelligence officer in World War II before moving to Chicago and earning a degree in television engineering. This lands him a job at Sanders Associates in New Hampshire. The company focuses on aircraft self-protection systems and tactical surveillance. While working there, the engineer from Germany has an idea, a light bulb moment, a box that can be connected to a television that enables interaction between two people. He proposes the idea to the company, and surprisingly enough, they give him a budget of $2,500 and a few engineers to mess around with building a prototype. This would become Ralph H. Baer's contribution to the gaming industry, the brown box. Magnavox licenses the system and calls it the Odyssey, the first commercial home video game console. This same year, Atari releases Pong, and the world of video games begins growing across the public psyche. I always thought Pong was the first video game. Turns out it was a game called Nim. So you have 4 rows. You start and can remove any number of dots from a single row. Then the computer can remove any number of dots from a single row. Then you, alternating until there's only 1 dot left. Basically, you win if you are leaving the last dot for the other player. It's surprisingly difficult, but it's simple. It's like literally a game of 1 and 0, right? Which is extremely fitting for the start of the video game medium. A medium that I think harkens back to perhaps the earliest form of storytelling, right? We're building these complex stories on top of code, which is basically what we were doing before around the campfire, except instead of code,
it was all a normal story.
This humble Legion soldier is at your service.